We know that voter suppression has happened in every single election because it's baked into the DNA of America. I'm Stacey Abrams, and this is A Word: Why Free and Fair Elections and an Accurate Census are Crucial in 2020.
When you chose me as your Democratic nominee, I made you a vow. In our Georgia, no one would be unseen, no one is unheard, and no one is uninspired.
In 2018, I ran for governor of Georgia. I had the honor of being the first African-American woman to be the nominee of a major party, and I was running in the Deep South. Unfortunately, I ran into a gauntlet of voter suppression tactics, and I did not become governor. In the aftermath of 2018, I wanted to focus on the two most essential challenges facing our community. One is ensuring that we have free and fair elections, and that is why I launched Fair Fight. And the second is ensuring that our communities are counted in the 2020 census, and so I launched faircount.org. Voter suppression is three things. We know that it's, can you get on the rolls and stay on the rolls? Can you cast your ballot, and can your ballot be counted? In Georgia, it meant, could you be purged by a Secretary of State weeks before he announced his run for governor? In Ohio, it's people who have been taken off of the rolls mistakenly. But it's also the ability to register in the first place. We also have to think about, can you cast a ballot? Has your precinct been closed? Do you have access to early voting? And does your ballot count, otherwise known as Florida? Because in the state of Florida, we have challenges year after year with people's votes not being counted. But it's not just Florida, it's across the country. Voter suppression affects us all. It's a danger to our democracy, but its targets typically are communities of color, especially African Americans. It happens to women, in part because their names often differ from their licenses or from their Social Security cards. But it also affects poor communities. When you lose access to a precinct, when they shut it down and move it miles away, if you don't have a car and you don't have a plan, you do not have the right to vote. And we know that the elderly and students are also often targets. And because of that, communities that are in the most need of support often have the least access to power. Voter suppression is so insidious and pervasive because it's not one issue. It's not Jim Crow laws or black codes. Today, it's thousands of little policies and hundreds of laws that on their face look race neutral, that look facially neutral, but we know are complicated. It's voter ID laws that say that in Texas, you can use your gun license, but you can't use your student ID. And so what we have to understand is that our first responsibility is to change those laws, not simply to fight back against bad laws, but to promote good laws. I'm proud of the work that's being done in Oregon, in California, New York, places that are finally stepping up and saying voter protection isn't enough. We need to have voter expansion. And those are laws that we should be demanding from everyone. We encourage folks to go to fairfight.com to sign up, because we'll give you information about what to look for in your community. But the basics are this. Make sure when you register that you double check to ensure that you're still on the rolls. Voter suppression begins by purging votes and purging voters without following the process. Number two, make sure that your polling place stays open. In Jonesboro, Georgia, right now, we're fighting to keep a polling place from going to a police station. We know that has an intimidating effect on young voters, especially young black voters. We want to make sure also that when you cast your ballot is secure. So you can be a part of organizations like the League of Women Voters or the NAACP fighting for secure ballots. Part of this is simply calling out the question. So if you don't want to do anything else, go online and talk about voter suppression on social media. In 2020, we have two fights that are happening at the same time. One is a fight for our democracy, making certain that every person who is eligible to cast a vote can do so. But it will also determine whether or not states have to rightfully apportion the new Congress for the people who live in those communities. So we're working to make certain that redistricting happens properly, that it's not gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is simply when politicians draw their lines so they can pick their voters rather than letting voters get to pick their politicians. One of the best ways to fight back against redistricting gerrymandering is to make certain we participate in the 2020 census. If African Americans are undercounted to the extent that they're expected to be undercounted, it will cost communities across the country $3 billion a year. $30 billion forfeited simply because they didn't see us. We're pushing hard through Fair Count to ensure that every person, especially hard to count communities like African Americans, like children, get counted in this census. When we are not counted, we do not count. And when we do not count, we do not improve our communities. The census happens once every decade. We don't get a do-over. And so we have to make certain that when they do it this year, that those who want to erase us from America do not win.